even notice. All right, guys, we've got our character built, if you're following along here, and it's time for us to start writing some code. So, in order for anything to happen in the game, we are going to have to write code to tell the computer what is supposed to happen. We've got our guy here, but he won't move forward, backward, left, right, any of that stuff because we haven't told the computer what keys are supposed to do that and how he's supposed to move, all that kind of stuff. So we have to be really, really specific, and code is how we do that. To make code in the game, we are going to create a C# file. So I'm going to come down to our project folder here, and out here in the empty space, I'm going to right click, and I've got this menu. I'm going to create a C# script. A lot of people like to do the exact same thing by coming over here and grabbing the create menu here, and you can create a C# script right there. My habit is just always to right click out here. It's the same thing either way. So I'm going to create a C# script and hit enter. Now, the default name on this is called new behavior script. And you can see over here in the inspector, because we've got this item selected so we can see its attributes over in the inspector, its name is called new behavior script right here. Public class new behavior script. We'll talk more about what this means, but the main thing I want to point out is that this is the file name from over here. That's what that is. And it matters how you name this thing. The file name, the name that you give it over here, is actually going to be reflected in code, and they have to be identical. So we don't want this to just have the default name. What I want to do is we're going to make a file to keep track of stuff like the player's health, how much magic power he has, all that kind of stuff. So the player's stats. So I'm going to just right click on this, and I'm going to rename it, and we're going to call it player stats. So now we are looking at the player stats script. It's named player stats. I gave it that name so that when I look at this thing, I can tell what that is for, and that's beautiful. Just, you want always to give descriptive names so that when you have not 3 items here in your project tab, but 300 or 3,000 items in a big game, you can tell what the thing is that you're looking at and what it's for. Descriptive names are very important. Now notice it says player stats over here, but over in the inspector, it still says new behavior script, and that is not okay. The class name has to be the same as the file name. So when we create this thing, it grabs the name that we give it initially and automatically puts it into the code over here. Now we can just take player stats and open this code up, which we're going to do in a moment. We could open the code up and change this to say player stats, but that's annoying. Instead, what we want to do is get good habits of naming things correctly the first way. So I'm just going to delete this, and let's redo this, and I'll show you the good way to be doing this. So I'm going to create a C# script, and notice that it's got this already highlighted. It's waiting for me to type right here. I haven't, there is no code yet, because since I haven't named it yet, it hasn't auto-populated all that code that we're going to see over here. So before I hit enter or do anything, I'm going to call this player stats. And before I hit enter, I want to explain how I'm naming this. Capital P, capital S, no spaces, because the name of this file is going to be the name of the class over here. That is actually a code name. It's the name of something in code. If you separate the 2 words, player and stats, with a space, that means that it's actually 2 different code words as far as the code is concerned. And this is one thing. It's not 2 things. It's one thing. So you can't put a space in there. In code, generally, instead of putting a space where you would separate words, you're just going to capitalize the first letter of whatever your second word is. Or if you have 5 words, then it's going to start, and then the second word will have a capital letter. Then the third word will have a capital letter. So that's how you can see where your words are separated. Because this is the name of a class in the code, it gets capitalized, and you'll quickly get used to. It'll work if I don't have it capitalized, but everyone will hate you, and you don't want any of that. So go with what everybody's used to. These conventions are very important in programming. So the name of your class should be capitalized at the beginning. So capital P, and because we have a new word, capital S. So player stats. Sorry to bore you for so long about that. Okay, hit enter. And it's whining at me because I'm coming back to this and remaking this video, and there's already a player stats script in the game. So you should leave yours called player stats, but I'm going to actually rename this. Oops. Let's delete and make another one. So yours should be called player stats because that'll help you, and everything else you're going to see is going to be called player stats in my videos here, except for this video because I'm going back and remaking this video. So player stats. I'm just going to throw a 2 on the end of that. Okay. Now notice as soon as I named this, it puts the name player stats 2 in the code. Now, all we have to do is, let me just check my notes, make sure I'm covering everything. I think we are ready to go ahead and open this in Visual Studio. So I'm just going to double click on this. Now, Microsoft Visual Studio gets installed with Unity. Come on, Visual Studio. So when you install Unity, this program, Visual Studio, gets installed along with it. And you're actually going to have 2 programs that are going to work side by side. You're going to write all your code in Visual Studio, and you're going to make the game over in Unity. So what we're looking at here is C# code. That's C#, that looks like this. I'm just going to type it so you can see it. So C#. It looks like C# or something like that, but C# is the name of this code language. And this is an object-oriented programming language. So what that means is that it's organized into a hierarchy system in the same way that we had a hierarchy over here. We have the player game object, right? And as components inside the player game object, we have the eyes, we have the nose, we have the feet. Those are all part of the bigger structure that is the player. So over here in Visual Studio, we're going to have a hierarchy as well. So we have our class is called player stats 2 in my case, but player stats. And that is going to contain a lot of smaller components. So we have methods here. This is the start method, update method. We're going to come back to those in a moment. But the main thing that we want to know at the moment is that these are encapsulated inside of this larger structure, the class. And that is going to be shown by these brackets. Now, our brackets are all messed up. A lot of times you can actually get in under the hood of Unity a little bit and change the file that auto-generates your starting code here. One of the things that I'm going to insist for my students that you do is push all the brackets down. Notice that I've put my cursor by this bracket up here, and it kind of highlighted it in orange, right? If you're on a Windows machine, your colors will be slightly different than me on a Mac here, but it will acknowledge this somehow. So I've put my cursor by this bracket here, and you can see the bracket down at the end is highlighted as well. That shows that these are a pair. This is the beginning. I'm just going to put my cursor right before that bracket and hit enter and push it down to the next line. Now notice we've got this nice little dotted line. I'll have to go back. If you guys, if your Visual Studio is not showing the dotted line, I can show you guys how to turn that on. Ask me about it. It's in the settings here somewhere, and I don't remember where off the top of my head. But this is super important visually to me, especially for students that are not used to writing code and used to keeping things encapsulated. This shows where my class called player stats is everything inside this bracket and this bracket. So we have two objects in our object-oriented programming language here, two objects that are inside this class. So the first one is called the start method, and the second one is the update method. Methods are one of several types of objects that we're going to have in the programming language here. So a method is basically a way of doing something. Before I talk more about methods, I'll come back to methods, but I want to explain what these guys are at the top. We have a class that's going to contain things like methods, and then we're going to have libraries that are going to contain lots of different classes. So every single piece of, like, we have this word void in here. We'll talk about that later. But the idea of what void is, the computer doesn't know what void is. We just type it. Somewhere there's a definition for what this word actually means to the code. And that is coming from other code that somebody else wrote earlier. That's in these libraries at the top. So, for example, later on we will be doing some work with Unity that it needs to use code commands that are not part of the Unity Engine basic library or the system libraries that we're using here. So we'll need to add references to additional libraries so that we have access to those commands. Okay, moving on. Let's come back down to the methods. Method is a way of doing something, and we have two basic methods that always get in here at the start. You know what? Before I continue, this is bothering me. I'm going to push the, and I'm going to insist you guys do too, push the brackets here that are at the end of a line down to the next line and make sure everything lines up perfectly. This level of insane organization that I'm being super nitpicky to make sure everything's perfectly lined up here. This will save your sanity later. Trust me, you want things to be perfect as far as nice and pretty lined up. Pretty code is easy to read code. And especially since you guys are new, that's going to be super important. Okay, not enough sidetracks here. Let's come back to methods. The start method and the update method are going to be your basic access into Unity's game actually running. So a game is going to run in frames. Frames, think of it like if you're watching a movie, you understand already, I'm sure, that what you're seeing is not a person moving. You're actually seeing a series of still pictures of the person moving. So if you're at the theater and you're watching a movie, those movies run at 24 frames per second. So it actually, every second they're showing you a series of 24 still pictures, and your brain just kind of bleeds them together into looking like a single moving image. It's not a moving image. It's a series of still images, right? If you're a gamer nerd like I am, and most of us studying games here, you'll have heard things like people talk about games that run at 60 frames per second. So studies have shown that if you have enough pictures in a row fast enough, that your brain will stop being able to tell the difference between something in your brain recognizes when you're watching a movie at the theater at 24 frames per second that it's not real. You just kind of say, well, I'm here to have fun, so I'm going to just believe that it's real for the moment. But your brain understands that it's looking at something that isn't actually in the room with you. When you increase the frame rate up to somewhere around 60, the human brain can't tell the difference anymore between reality and and something that's a series of still images. So 60 frames per second is what everybody likes to run at. I just talked about all the frames as pictures, a series of still pictures, but in computers, you're actually talking about not the picture that you get at the end, but you're talking about one cycle of computing what is supposed to be shown in the picture. In a movie, you actually had a camera take a picture, and maybe somebody went back and animated or drew, magic and stuff into the picture after the fact, because they didn't have magic on set, of course. So in that same way, the computer is going to go step by step, still picture by still picture, and run all the code in the entire game one time through to find out what the picture should look like. And then it's going to draw it using the graphics card. And that's what you get to see. So when we talk about frame rate in games, yeah, we're kind of talking about how many pictures per second, but we're actually talking about how many times the computer can run the code to generate a picture. That's really what we're talking about. The start function, start method, is going to be important because when this piece of code runs for the first time, the very first frame of the game that it actually computes this piece of code with, it's going to look in the start function to see what we're supposed to do. In the start method right now, there's nothing in here, so it's going to do nothing. Every frame for the entire rest of the game where this piece of code is active in the game, it's going to look not in the start function because that only runs the first time. It's going to look in the update function. Update, I keep using function and method interchangeably. So that's worth saying that the word method is the proper name for in C# code for one of these guys. The word function is sort of a more general computing term for what this exact thing is. So you'll hear people say the start function, the start method. It's the exact same thing. Anyway, once we get past the first frame that this code runs in the game, we're going to go into the update function, and it's going to continue to run every frame until the game shuts this piece of code off and doesn't look at it anymore. Now, I realize I've talked for a really long time. Let's actually write some code. We're going to go into the start function here. I just hit tab to move over from where my cursor was here to make a space over to where I want to type. Everything inside of the brackets. So here's the beginning and end bracket or the open and close bracket of the player stats class. Everything that's in between those should be pushed over to the next tab space so that it looks like there's nothing between the open and the close, and we get this nice clean line all the way down. Everything that's in between those is tabbed over one space. And as far as that goes, if you highlight and you hit tab here, it's gonna move everything over a space like that. I'm just gonna undo that. Okay, so just know that you can move things over with tab like that, and it spaces things the way you want. The line of code that we're going to write is called, just follow along with me, and I'll explain it once it's on screen. So debug.log, open and close parentheses, and a semicolon. Semicolon is next to your letter L on your keyboard. Okay, so what we've got here is that from the system libraries up here, there is a class somewhere defined that is called debug. Right now, we're looking at the definition of the class player stats, and this is the definition of the start function. It's got some stuff, the word void, the name of the thing that actually would you would trigger this with. If you were writing code somewhere else and you want this thing to run, you would reference this word, start. And then we've got parentheses. Inside the parentheses, we tell the start function if other information should be given to this function so that it can run properly. So in the systems library, there is a debug class, and in it there is a method called log. And log always takes some information in its parentheses. So we always have to have the parentheses there, even if we're putting a method that doesn't need information. The parentheses being there is one of the ways that C# understands that this is a method. So the parentheses are necessary. The information that we're going to give it is what this is going to print into the Unity's console. The debug.log, what it's for is to log message commands while the game is running. So if we look over here back in Unity, in the default layout, the console tab is right next to the project in the same window here. And we have this is the area where it's going to show messages. If something crashes during the game, this is where we're going to get a message about it. The debug.log allows us to actually post a message there. The message that we want to post there is in quotes so that the computer doesn't think we're giving it computer code. We want it to actually put this text there. So in double quotes, not two single quotes. That's a single double quote, if that makes sense. And everybody in the universe, the first line of code that they always write is hello world. So you should write hello world. Everybody gets a kick out of making the computer say hello to the world. So maybe I shouldn't capitalize W in the middle of a sentence. This is an English language sentence that we're posting. Okay, so I'm going to hit save, and then we are going to switch over. You guys see this thing pop up here as I'm switching programs. What I'm doing is I'm on a Mac, so I'm holding the command key next to the space bar and pressing tab. As long as I'm holding command, it lets me switch through everything. If you're on a Windows machine, you can do the exact same thing by holding Alt tab. Get used to using this because it will make your life much better. If you have to move your mouse somewhere and click on the other program, that gets annoying. But if you just get used to hitting Alt tab, you can switch back and forth really fast. Okay, so I'm over here. I'm going to save this. Maybe I saved it already. I can go to the File menu and grab Save. I already did save it, but so let me do that again real quick. I'm just going to add a space here at the end. CSharp doesn't care about spaces, so it's changed now. If I go to File, it lets me save now because I've got a slightly different version. So I'm going to pick Save, but actually I'm not going to pick Save. The only reason I came up here is to show you that in this menu, it tells you what the hotkey command is to save. I'm on a Mac, so it's Command and the letter S. On a Windows machine, that's Control S. But you can always look in the menus that you have at the top to see what the hotkey command is to do that. So I'm going to hit Control S real quick, Command S on my Mac. Notice it's saved, and now it doesn't let me save because it saved the last version. Okay, it's saved, which means that when we switch back over to Unity, if we click on that, notice it's got our code in it. The spacing looks all janky and stuff in the inspector here. Don't worry about that. As long as it looks right over here where you have to work on it, you're going to be in good shape. But our updates have been saved, therefore Unity knows about the changes. So we'll switch over to the console, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to hit play. And it switches from the scene tab to the game tab as soon as the game is actually running. For a moment, when you hit play, nothing actually happens. It has to compile a sort of a quick version of the game to be able to run it. So you hit play, nothing happening, it's getting ready. There, when it switches to the game tab, now the game is running. And if we look down in the console, we can see a whole lot of nothing. This code that we made that says debug.log hello world, it has done nothing. And the reason for that is because we have our code file here on the hard drive. We can see it in the project tab. That's where it exists. But it's not in the game. The hierarchy window up here shows everything that is in the game. So we've got our directional light, we've got our camera, we've got our player, we've got our floor, and the code isn't up there. These are game objects, and every component that you see in the inspector is actually it's either a C# code like this, or it's a special kind of C# code. So actually everything over here is a C# code file. So what we need to do is we need to find a game object that's in the scene. I'm just going to grab the player, and then we're going to add, since I'm coming back, you can see I've already got player stats and player motion and all this stuff that I've added already to the guy. You know, since that's complicated, I'm going to add it to the floor. The floor is simple. It's got nothing on it. Basically, this file has to be added to something that's in the game so that the game will actually access this code and run it. So I'm going to pick the floor. I'm going to grab my file right here, and I can drop it directly into the inspector. If I don't point in the right place, notice I don't get that blue line. But if I come up here, I get a little blue line. It's going to put it in between those two things, right? That's fine. I can put it right there. Player stats is now a component of the floor. Now I could just as easily grab this and drop it onto the floor up here in the hierarchy. Unity usually has about 5 different ways that you can do any one thing. So I'm not going to try and show you guys how to do everything. But I am going to show you just probably my normal favorite way. Okay, so the floor now has the player stats script. And when I hit play, because that script is now part of the floor, which is actually in the game, we get a debug message. It says, "Hello world." That's perfect. Okay. Congratulations on your first line of code. Hopefully you followed along and hopefully everything went well. I want to show you one more thing before we bounce out here. That was in the start function. The start method, as I said, runs at the beginning of every, on the first frame that this code runs. But I'm going to actually take this and I'm going to cut it out of there. I'm hitting Command X or Control X on your Windows machine. Tab over there and hit paste. Now I'm going to put it in the update function because I want you to see what that does differently. Let's save it. Control S and switch back over to Unity. There we go. I'm going to clear my messages before I hit play. I don't have to do any of the stuff I did before because in Unity I've already attached that code to the floor. As long as I have saved my change over here, which I can check that by, oh yes, I have saved because it doesn't give me an option to save. Unity will know about that and the file is already in place. So all I have to do is hit play. Wait for it to start. And now I have Hello World, but I only have one Hello World. I promised that it would be running every frame. And so it should be saying Hello World again. We should be getting a new Debug.log message in the console every frame. Well, we are actually. I've got this button here called Collapse turned on. And if I click it, notice I've got lots and lots and lots. And you can see the thing scrolling because we have more than 999 messages. I'm going to collapse this again. And what it does this way is it keeps posting it, but every time you get the exact same message in the console, it just counts them over here. And that's nice because now I get to see what other, maybe I'm getting an error somewhere and I don't want it to go past, like driving past something on the freeway and you didn't even see it go past and now you're somewhere else, right? So we can see this is also a clue that you can use sometimes. If it keeps counting an error message, you'll know that the problem that you have to fix is somewhere in your update function, probably not in a start function. So you can get a lot of clues about this. Another thing that's important to know is that we have there's 3 different types of messages that you can get over here. You can get error messages, which have the stop sign button. You can get console messages, which are what that is. A debug message, hello world. Since I clicked this button, it's not showing it to us. It's only going to show us because the stop sign is the only thing clicked here. It's only going to show me genuine error messages. There is a problem with this code. And since I don't have any of those, we don't see it. So one of the things, if you feel like your code should be running, but you don't see the message, check to make sure that that is actually clicked so that it is showing you your debug messages. Okay, guys, I think that's about it for right now. You've got your first line of code. I told you way more than you need to know, but you will soon need to know it about C# code and about how to create C# files and get them attached to game objects. You only wrote one line of code, but we covered kind of a lot here. So hopefully that is all clear enough. And you'll definitely be using it soon. So we'll refer back to pretty much everything I said in this video a lot. So ask me questions if you got problems, and we'll move on to the next one. Thanks, guys.